I call Dr Megan Woods.
Mr Speaker, I'd just like to say to the member that took his seat, cheer up. It's not that bad. 26 for none in the fourth over, not that bad. Maybe it's the kind of week that side of the House is having. I call that a good start. But, Mr Speaker, we're here at the third reading of the New Zealand Horticulture Export Authority Amendment Bill, and there's a number of points that the previous speaker made that I'd like to respond to. First of all, I would like to commend the Select Committee. Clearly this is a piece of legislation that was aimed at updating, a piece of legislation that was past its use-by date, that needed updating, a piece of legislation that was passed in 1987, that was 3 years before Bill English entered Parliament. So it really did need updating in terms of that. But, Mr Speaker, a number of these changes were warranted and sensible changes that the committee made, and they were around the need of the industries covered off under this agreement to have the flexibility to be able to respond. I think the first change that the Select Committee made about when an office holder is unavailable, and the amendment that was made to Clause 10 with the insertion of new Clause 13A, was the identifying who the alternative chairperson is when the chairperson is unavailable could be seen by some as quite prescient in terms of what the the members on the opposite side of the House are doing. But don't worry, you can always look at the caucus rulebook to find out what those rules are as well. The other changes that needed to be made around this were the tiers of licences and, of course, the rules that needed to go around sharing of information. That this is a piece of legislation that is about seeing product groups cooperate for industry good, to work together to market particular product groups, and that requires the sharing of information. And, Mr Speaker, whenever we do require that kind of sharing of information, there has to be robust rules around how that is done. Likewise, when it is that you give statutory power to a body to levy, that is also something that needs to make sure that it is circumcised and the right rules are around it. Because fundamentally, the groups who are asked to voluntarily sign up and be part of this authority have to have faith, because it is a voluntary scheme, Mr Speaker, and they have to have confidence that that is the case. And, Mr Speaker, the previous speaker, the chair of the Select Committee, who has done an able job on this, made a good point in his speech. He talked about the need for us to be able to identify and allocate more land for horticulture in our future. That this is a high-value export for us that is very much part of New Zealand's economic future. I couldn't agree more. And I hope that member will see that a land use strategy is what is required. And introducing agriculture into the emissions trading scheme is an absolute critical part of deciding how it is that we use our land for future use. So, Mr Speaker, I was heartened to hear those comments from the Speaker opposite to say that he's up to face the challenge of how it is that we identify more land, and it is through progressive measures like looking about how it is that we use our land in a holistic way. But, Mr Speaker, the kinds of products that are coming into this speak to the diversity of our horticultural industry in New Zealand. The horticultural industry is an industry that I have worked with before I entered Parliament, and I think it is an exciting industry and one that is very much part of New Zealand's future. And when we see the diversity of groups coming in here from, as previous speakers have mentioned, from chestnuts to squash and various products in between, it is very exciting. But I think one of the key things that this legislation does, and really was required and shows how the world has moved since 1987, was allow the fit-for-purpose marketing in different markets. That what we know, where we've seen New Zealand horticultural products succeed, that they've had very targeted marketing strategies into particular markets that have been based on the benefits of the particular cultivar that is being used. Often a screening process is used to identify the type of cultivar that will be fit for that market. market and marketed through there, but also a lot of very sophisticated consumer research that has occurred within many of our horticultural industries in New Zealand that knows that if it wants to market into a particular market, that health and wellness may well be the way in one market, but it may be about security of supply into another market, and it may be about pure New Zealand into another. And I celebrate any legislation that allows this kind of flexibility for groups to really be strategic and to target their efforts where it is going to benefit the particular industry, the group that it is benefiting. But Mr Speaker, we all know, and I think can all agree, that the export value of our fruit and vegetables is going to be very much part of New Zealand's future. That we know that this is a more sustainable use of our land than many other land uses that are out there, and we can just look at the dollars, that we had $50 million of exports in 1988, a year after this legislation was passed, rising to $300 million last year. That this is growth that we need to make sure that we're putting the legislation in place to support that growth and to make sure that our industry sectors can succeed. Labor is happy to support this legislation.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.